Hey guys, I wanted to make an analysis and guide on how to shoot like Harry Kane. So it's been about a year and I think I finally nailed it. So this is kind of like a follow-up video to this clip right here. I would say it's also a follow-up video to the previous one about flopping your ankle. As I talk through the mechanics, it'll make a bit more sense. So there were two general ways I approached shooting this way. The first was having very little hip turn into the direction I was going to shoot, and mostly opening my hip the other way, just to kind of deceive the keeper and the defenders into thinking I'm going here completely before kind of shooting the other way. So let's watch this clip. So as I approach the ball, you see as I begin to swing, I'm kind of like opening my hip here. And then see my hip remains open. Actually, I even open it, a little bit more this way. And then I kind of reach around the ball. I talked in the previous video about flopping your ankle, so it's not completely down. It's a little bit over there. That way, I don't have to turn my hips as much, and I can get like leverage around the ball to hit it this way. And you see, as a result, not only like is my hip pointed this way, you see I'm kind of like forced to look over there. If you ever see Phil Foden finish, either in a game or when he's training, he often does this, and I suspect it's him, like, having this very open hip the whole way. He doesn't really like close his hip like that much, if at all. And doing this way, like I find like. I do kind of have like a follow through, but it's relatively short. I can't really guide the ball. I have to rely on the initial trajectory of where my foot is, and then hoping like I can have like just a clean contact and hitting where I want. So one area I noticed that was very hard to kind of do it this way in terms of having very little hip turn this way and just keeping it completely open and opening it the opposite way is when you're shooting at speed and the ball's rolling relatively fast. So to see what I mean, let's watch this clip. And just for the record, I was aiming for this corner here, so you can see me miss target by quite a bit. So there's two things to mention here. So even though initially that's what I was going for, was trying to have little to no hip turn, that's not really practical if the ball's like rolling fast, because if you don't want to turn your hip into the shot, the ball will generally roll away from you. And of course I mentioned before that kind of having your ankle a bit like flapped and I would say exposed more with the instep. So kind of like hitting with like the side of the ball with kind of like that area between the side of the foot and the laces. Here I have like generally, at least I do, and I find a lot of other players who like they have a habit of you really want to like strike it fast, is to hit with the laces. Um, Even if you hit like have the right initial trajectory, I find like if you expose the laces this way, especially since you're swinging fast and the ball's like rolling quite fast, there's a tendency for the ball to kind of slide off your foot because it's like a flat surface and you're not cradling the ball. So even though you get like the right trajectory, since the ball is kind of exposed to a flat surface, it kind of slides off your foot, and then there's a tendency to to really miss your target, and you can't really have like good pinpoint accuracy. And finally, here's the technique like Harry Kane that I've been talking about. So let's watch this clip first. So I've seen like a couple of videos. I've talked about not only having good accuracy and consistency and getting in the corners, but also enough flair. So in terms of when you set up for the shot, I'm not like jumping and posturing to shoot early. Ideally, I don't really like turn my hips aggressively and begin to shoot until I'm almost landing with my plant foot. Because if I do it early here, not only the goalkeeper could potentially read, but the defender defending me could potentially get a block in. The other thing I talked about was having flair of the shot. So a lot of times the goalkeeper can really predict your shot if you just turn your hips early. So I find like a lot of players, they get really good power and even accuracy, but a lot of times goalkeepers can always like make an impressive save for some reason. And a lot of times I find what they do is like they turn their hips like super early, and then they keep it flat, and then like at the same time you can actually expose their laces and hit more like straight there. I talked about briefly about the importance of cradling the ball with more towards the instep and kind of like flopping your foot in a certain angle, so the ball doesn't like roll off your foot as you go in a straight line. So what I was going for was like trying to make sure I don't really turn my hips until the last moment here. This is like where I really turn aggressively. So I turn as much as I can at the um, with keeping in mind flapping my foot. So since my foot's like a bit more flapped, like it's not completely down. I don't have to turn my hips as much, and it also again cradles the ball as I fall through. And when you turn your hips so aggressively and like with so much torque, you do get a lot of power. But we've all done this. Like a lot of times you also like can potentially scuff the ball. So we've all done this where you turn your hips really aggressively and you kind of like your foot almost like kind of wraps around the ball and like it goes wide and you really scuff the ball because since like you're turning your hips in this kind of arc too, your foot doesn't go in like a straight line towards where you want to go. It doesn't hit the ball cleanly, it kind of curves at the same time. So this is kind of related with trying to keep your hips open, like as I mentioned, uh, with like little hip turn and hip actually turning the hip the opposite way to like full the finger going there. So I mentioned here like you could vary it too. Like if you this is a bit hard to like do it at the very last moment, but you could turn a bit earlier. I find that's easier to do, but I just wanted to, for demonstration purposes, like turn very late into the shot and with a lot of aggression, not too much, just enough where I can, in my mind, have good. I have a good contact area to go straight to where I want. But with so much torque and like rotation here, to counteract like my leg like not following straight, what I actually want to do is not only keep my hip open, but actually turn it back slightly, and I find that allows like to counteract like the leg swing momentum, and it goes in a straight line to where I want. So it makes it a lot more consistent and in line to the target. And just for reference, this is Harry Kane's shot here. I wasn't trying to completely choreograph Kane's shot, but I try to keep a lot of the techniques in mind in terms of like what I mentioned, like having like consistency, not posturing early for the shot, having enough flair so the keeper can't anticipate your hips early. But with this kind of like aggressive like torque of turning your hips very late and then like turning it back and then having your foot sweep. I noticed you see like I've noticed this before and I wasn't sure exactly why, but you see like both our legs how it falls through like this. You see that kind of foot shape? That's due to kind of like almost cradling the ball, so hitting more with your instep and kind of like maybe sometimes turning your ankle in a bit more, maybe flopping it up a little bit. Not always like keeping it down completely. So I find like if you swing like with this much like torque and then like this and then like opening your hips, like if you have like a very flat surface, like again there's a tendency for the ball to like slide off your foot, so you kind of want to like cradle the ball with like the instep and like having the right angle. Like you can kind of make your own adjustments, but shaping your foot so like the ball remains cradled as you go, fall through on target. But you kind of again you see that foot, it kind of goes up in the air, and I noticed that was kind of unique. But I finally managed to pull it off here, and with the arms like this, since I'm turning back aggressively after the aggressive hip turn. Again, I wasn't trying to do this, but I thought it was interesting that I managed to make it look like this after um, going through the aforementioned techniques. Another little tip here is actually I find what Messi does as well is a lot of times when you shoot, like I said, like a lot of players they try to like prepare themselves like to turn their hips. A lot of times they'll move their like shooting foot, in this case my right foot, about out there to like position themselves to like turn into the shot. But I find a lot of times what Messi will do, he'll like kind of like almost like feint into the center of his body, and then as a result, you have to like turn a lot more aggressively late into the shot, and that produces a lot more power and flair since you're not turning early, and you need to turn aggressively since you're doing it later into the shot. So just to go over what I mentioned was, you know, ideally turning a bit later into the shot, and the later you turn in, generally the more aggressively you have to turn in, depending on how far you're hitting. And ideally, you want to turn as you don't want to turn more than you have to. So in your mind, you kind of like positioning your foot to like flap up and maybe turn in a bit. So it's not completely flat this way, which means you have to turn your hips even more to compensate. And then as you follow through, you want to kind of like open and like turn up the opposite way. So during the follow through, your foot sweeps in a straight line rather than it kind of curves and then you scuff the ball.